Happy Monday, everybody. It is February 23rd, 2026, and you are tuned in to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and we're tackling a subject today that I think feels incredibly relevant for anyone who has ever felt their heart rate just absolutely spike when a plan goes off the rails. You know that exact feeling, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's that visceral drop in your stomach the moment you realize the safety net is just...
Exactly. So to set the stage for you listening, I want you to picture this. You're at work, or maybe you're managing a massive family event, and suddenly chaos hits. Like a critical server crashes during a product launch.
Or a key supplier cancels an hour before the wedding.
Right, the timeline completely collapses. Now, most people, they freeze, they need a minute or maybe 10 minutes to process the disaster, but there is one specific type of person who might freeze for a split second, literally just the blink of an eye, and then they immediately explode into action.
Yeah, they're the first responder of the personality world.
Right. And to really understand this person, whether it's you or your boss or maybe that colleague who scares you just a little bit, we're digging into the Max Energy ME80 personality system today.
Which is such a fascinating framework. And for those of you who might be new to our deep dives, the Max Energy ME80 system, it isn't just about labeling you an introvert or an extrovert.
No, not at all.
It's really a framework that looks at how energy flows through a person, so how they process information, emotion, and decision-making. And today we are focusing on a very specific profile code, the WWSN.
Also known by its very dramatic, very cool title, the Impact Storm Responder.
It's a vivid name, isn't it? Impact Storm Responder. And it really fits. Our mission today is to decode this type. We're going to walk through their entire operating system from their core identity to the specific way their brain handles risk.
So let's start with the headline. If we had to put the WWSN identity on a billboard, what is the core declaration here?
The core definition is this: stunned by sudden impact, then responds fast to turn shock into countermove and breakthrough.
I want to pause on that first part. Stunned by sudden impact. I really like that inclusion because it makes them sound human. I think there's a misconception that crisis managers are, robots who just don't feel the shock.
That's a crucial distinction, and the source material's very specific about this. The WWSN isn't immune to stress. They aren't stoic statues. In fact, the report describes them as being momentarily disoriented when change strikes. Their emotions and senses actually heighten simultaneously.
There's a flood of input.
Completely. They feel the chaos more intensely than others for that first second.
So they feel the hit. They take the punch.
They absolutely feel it. But the mechanism of this personality is what happens next. That moment of disorientation passes incredibly quickly. Their body and consciousness instinctively take over and shift into response mode.
It's like a reflex, like touching a hot stove. You don't think, oh, I should move my hand. You just move.
Precisely. It's described as an action-oriented personality type that is specifically awakened in moments of high pressure. Where others might retreat to think or, convene a committee to discuss the problem, the Impact Storm Responder wakes up. The pressure isn't a hindrance, it's the fuel.
So let's unpack how they see the world. If you're walking around with this software running in your brain, what is your control philosophy? How do they try to control this chaotic world?
Their worldview is defined by acute risk perception. They are naturally sensitive to where things could go wrong. But, and this is the key differentiator, their philosophy of control isn't about avoiding the world or hiding from risk. It's about intervention.
Intervention, that's a very active word. It implies stepping in.
Very active. When chaos hits, they don't try to analyze the whole picture immediately. They aren't trying to solve the root cause just yet. They identify the most urgent point of trouble, the bleeding wound, so to speak, and they convert that initial shock into executable action.
The report describes their energy signature in a really interesting way. First, stunned, then mobilized, stabilizing in motion.
Stabilizing in motion is the concept I want you to really grab onto as you're listening. They don't wait for things to calm down before they act. They act to make things calm down. They create stability through their movement.
Okay, so let's pop the hood on this because this is the part I was really looking forward to. The Max Energy system uses this concept called the energy matrix.
Right, it's the engine architecture of the personality.
Yeah, and it breaks down into IP, IQ, EQ, and manifestation.
And we have to be careful here because in the Max Energy context, these acronyms have very specific functional meanings regarding how energy is processed. It's the sequence of how a thought becomes an action.
So let's walk through it layer by layer for the WWSN. Step 1 is IP, the inner value layer. What is happening here?
So the IP layer is the start. It's the gut check.
Yeah.
For the impact storm responder, this function is risk perception activation. This is that immediate detection system we talked about. Before they even know what is wrong, the radar pings. There is danger. There is instability. It's visceral.
It's the early warning system, like the hair standing up on the back of your neck before you even see the threat.
Yes. Then that signal moves to layer 2, the IQ, or emotional activation layer. Now, usually when people hear IQ, they think math problems or logic puzzles.
Right, standard general intelligence, but that's not what we mean here.
No. In the max energy matrix, this layer handles risk and consequence assessment. This isn't just feeling fear, it's a rapid, almost subconscious simulation. What happens if this goes wrong? What is the fallout? They are assessing the consequences in real time.
So they see the danger at the IP layer and immediately calculate the cost of the danger at the IQ layer.
Exactly. And that leads us to the third layer, which I think is the most fascinating part of this profile, the EQ, or decision calculation layer.
And again, the standard definition of EQ is usually empathy, social skills, reading a room. But here, the function is listed as emotional containment and stabilization. That sounds intense.
It is intense, and this is critical to understand. Remember, we said they are stunned initially. They have a massive surge of emotion and adrenaline. The EQ layer's job in this specific profile is to contain that emotion so the person can function.
It's like a dam.
It's a dam holding back a flood so the turbine can spin. It doesn't get rid of the emotion. It contains it to allow for decision-making. If they didn't have this layer, they would just panic. But the EQ clamps down on the panic and converts it into focus.
That is such a vital nuance. To an outsider, the impact storm responder looks totally calm. But they aren't calm because they don't care. They are functioning because they are actively wrestling that storm inside.
Perfectly described. And finally, we have the manifestation layer. This is where the energy releases outward. For the WWSN, this is pure impact, action, visible manifestation. All that internal processing, the risk detection, the assessment, the containment fires out as a countermove against the chaos.
Which brings us to their core inner quality. The report uses this great phrase, real-time adaptation. And it uses an analogy that I think everyone can visualize instantly. The falling ball.
It's the best way to describe them. The report says they aren't inclined toward prolonged observation. Instead, they instinctively catch the falling ball, stop the bleeding, and divert the flow.
Think about that visual. A glass vase is knocked off a table.
Right.
One type of person might scream. Another might stare at it. Another might start planning how to clean up the glass before it even hits the floor.
But the impact storm responder, their hand shoots out. They don't have time to write a plan about how to catch it. They don't have time to discuss the physics of gravity. They just move.
And they catch it.
They catch it. That is their intuitive survival strategy. They pull disorder back into a manageable range. Even as emotion is surging inside them, the action proceeds in tandem. They're fixing the problem while they're freaking out, not after.
That's an incredible asset. But and there is always, but in these deep dives, running on that kind of high-octane fuel has to have a cost. You can't just spike your adrenaline 5 times a day without paying a tax.
It does have a cost, a high one. And this brings us to the shadow blind spot. Every strength has a shadow. And for the WWSN, it is called high-pressure internal depletion.
That sounds exhausting just saying it.
It is. The essence here is, once the situation passes, emotion lingers.
Explain that a bit more, because on the outside, they usually look like they've handled it. They're the hero. They high-five everyone and go back to their office.
They are the hero in the moment. But the trap is that to fuel that rapid response, they amplify the severity of the risk in their own minds. They basically trick their body into a fight-or-flight state to get the job done, but equilibrium returning to baseline returns very slowly.
So the crisis ends at 2 p.m. Everyone else goes back to their desks and relaxes. But the impact storm responder is still vibrating at a frequency of danger.
Exactly. Their body is still shouting emergency, even though the emergency is over. The report notes a specific danger here: internal accumulation. Without systematic reflection and external support, that stress accumulates in an internalized form.
They're holding on to the toxicity of the crisis.
Yes. To the outside world, they look restored. They look ready for the next one. But beneath the surface, there is a repeating tension that slows down true recovery. It's like an engine that never fully cools down. Eventually, the metal starts to warp.
They're burning the candle at both ends, but the burning is happening on the inside where no one can see it. And that inevitably spills over into how they interact with people, doesn't it?
It does. Let's look at the social dynamics section. The report calls their social signal a signal of pressure.
Signal of pressure. That doesn't sound very warm and fuzzy.
It's a paradox, really. On one hand, they radiate security. If the building is on fire, you want to be standing next to the impact storm responder. They make you feel safe because you know they are handling it. They are the captain of the ship in the storm.
But on the other hand,
they radiate urgency, and that stresses people out.
I can see that. If someone is constantly in contain or resolve mode, they probably communicate in short, direct bursts. Do this. Go there. Stop that.
They do. Their communication pace is hurried. It's direct. It's often blunt. And while that's necessary and even appreciated in a crisis, it creates tension in colleagues during normal times. If there's no fire, but you're still acting like a firefighter, people get exhausted.
The report points out that colleagues often depend on their crisis management ability, but they might maintain distance afterward due to that high-pressure tone.
That's the tragedy of this type. You're the person everyone needs when things go wrong, but you're the person people might avoid when things are going right because you're still intense. It creates a dynamic where relationships require what the source calls repair and reconnection after the incident passes.
They have to consciously step down from that commander role to reconnect as a human being.
And that's hard to do when you're still suffering from that internal depletion we talked about.
So let's pivot to the practical application here. If we look at this from a career perspective, clearly this is a valuable set of skills, but it's also niche. What is the business value of an impact storm responder?
Their corporate superpower is defined as first response to crisis.
The EMTs of the business world.
Exactly. In the corporate ecosystem, they excel at rapid containment. When you have chaos mixed with blame, which is a toxic combination, they are the ones that can step in, decompose the problem, and drive resolution. They cut through the noise. They are an indispensable stabilizing force on the front line.
So where do we put them? If I'm a hiring manager or if I'm an impact storm responder looking for my tribe, where do I thrive?
The report has 4 specific recommendations that really align with this energy matrix. First up, customer service and crisis management.
Makes sense. Handling complaints, PR nightmares, you need someone who doesn't take the anger personally, but just solves the issue.
Exactly. Anything where you need to coordinate an emergency. Second, project emergency response. This is for when there's a process rupture or a sudden shortage of resources. You drop them in to fix the blockage.
Like a consultant you parachute in when the timeline is flashing red and the client is screaming?
Precisely. They aren't there to build the long-term strategy. They are there to stop the ship from sinking today. Third, high volatility operating environments. Think early-stage startups or fast-paced retail.
Places where change isn't a quarterly event, but an hourly one.
Where the plan changes before you've even finished writing it. They thrive there because they don't get attached to plan A.
And the fourth one?
Executive roles, requiring swift decision-making. Specifically, positions where judgment has to occur despite incomplete information.
That's a key distinction. Some executives need all the data, the spreadsheets, the forecasts before they move. They need 100% certainty.
The impact storm responder can move with 60% of the data. Because their intuition on risk is so high, they can fill in the gaps. They can see the trajectory of the falling ball without measuring its velocity.
They fill in the gaps with that risk perception we talked about earlier.
Yes. But again, they need to be careful not to burn out their teams with that urgency.
So we've covered the mechanism, the hidden cost, the social paradox, and the career path. It's a complex profile, heroic, but heavy. As we wrap up this deep dive, what is the one thing, the final takeaway that we should understand about the impact storm responder?
The ultimate value of this personality type lies in absorbing the system's first shockwave. That is a heavy burden to carry. And the advice from the Max Energy Report is clear. What they need is not more speed, they're fast enough. What they need is clear support and time to settle afterward.
That leads us to the golden sentence of the report, which I think is just beautiful. When each courageous step is met with relay support, impact transforms into genuine breakthrough.
That's the key. Relay support. They can take the first step, they can catch the ball, but they need someone to take the baton so they can breathe. If you leave them holding the ball forever, they will break.
A powerful reminder for anyone working with or living as a WWSN. Catch the ball, but pass it on. Now, before we sign off, we want to give credit where credit is due. This deep dive was based on the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report.
If this resonated with you, or if you're curious to see where you fit in this matrix, you can find out more. You can visit their official website at www.maxenergylife.com.
And for our listeners who are on social media, you can search on Facebook. what are the specific terms they should look for to find this community?
You can search for max energy, followed by the Chinese characters for polyenergy personality studies, that's max energy S Andor, or search for med-energy Vossing.
Fantastic. Now, as we leave you today, I want you to think about this. If you are someone who thrives in the storm, what happens when the waters finally calm down? Do you actually know how to sit in the peace? Or are you just waiting for the next ball to fall? Something to chew on.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.
Goodbye, everyone.